Hi, my name is Alex Williams, founder of the New Stack, and you are listening to the New Stack Analyst Podcast, the show about at-scale application development, deployment, and management. Thanks for joining us. Thanks to VMware for sponsoring the Pancake Breakfast from the Cloud Foundry Summit in Basel, Switzerland. Our topic for the discussion, the new Cloud Foundry Container Runtime and Application Runtime running on BOSH. What are these new runtimes and what do they mean for the developer experience? Learn more about VMware's cloud-native applications at cloud.vmware.com. Good morning, everyone. Who'd like to see the Kubo movie trailer again? I thought it might be just one more showing. Yes. All right, let's watch the Kubo movie trailer. I chose this because obviously we came into this breakfast thinking this was going to be all about Kubo, right? But then lo and behold, yesterday morning we got some news about the container runtime. So this is time for Kubo. This is our farewell to Kubo. But this is a great movie, and we're from Portland, and Leica is our animated film studio there, and they made this film, and I'd highly recommend it. And I thought just because it's named Kubo, we might as well watch it, because there's lots of mythology, and there's lots of mythology in tech, so let's go for it. Okay, so.
Just a rebrand.
Blink. Do it now. Pay careful attention to everything you see, no matter how unusual it may seem. If you look away, even for an instant, then our hero will surely perish. It is time to follow my own path. My name is Kubo. This is my story.
Your magic is growing stronger, but when we grow stronger, the world grows more dangerous.
You've got my attention. I promise I won't even blink. I actually don't think I even can blink. Do I have eyelids?
Okay, that's enough. So I want to just play that because I do think there's lots of stories in the technology community that we sometimes overlook. The people, the technology, and how these stories unfold. And we can see the story unfolding here at the Cloud Foundry Summit about the evolution of technology. But before I got started with the regular presentation, the regular talk that we're going to have and discussion, I wanted to also play something because if people are familiar who've been to our pancake breakfast before, we used to have a pancake robot. And, and there's my, look, everything can see everything here. So we've had to say goodbye to our beloved pancake robot. And because we would bring this pancake robot around to all parts of the world. And we would have these pancake breakfasts and we'd show the robot, but I don't think everyone realizes how much time and energy it takes actually to manage a device like that. It makes me think like, no, robots are not going to control the world actually, because there's going to be so many people to manage these things. I mean, the hours we spent just preparing the batter to make sure it's the right granularity, it's the right, so on and on. So this is our Bon Voyage stacking. I was talking to Devin, and Devin, this one's for you, okay? Because Devin was really sentimental about this, so we made this for Devin. So let's play it. Wait a second. All right.
The Delta was still sentimental about it.
Okay, let's try this again.
I will remember you.
Here you are, Devin.
Will you
So this was our pancake robot. Goodbye, Stacky.
don't let your love
Okay, that's enough.
pass you by.
No, there's a maple leaf in here. There it is. That's from KubeCon last year. Here's from MesosCon. There's a MesosCon pancake. And what's that one right there? Can you guess? DockerCon. I forget where that one was from. Does Judy remember that one? Here, if I recall. That's the TNS Analyst pancake.
Funny how I feel so much.
Okay.
Cannot say what
And there we go.
you're screaming.
Bon voyage, Stacky. All right, let's get started on that note. Okay, my name's Alex Williams. I'm founder and editor-in-chief of the New Stack, and we're a technology publication, and we focus on explanation and analysis of kind of these very complex technologies that we are all trying to understand. And I think that's really evident in what we're seeing over the past several months in this community. So this is our pancake breakfast. We'd like to sponsor VMware for making this possible today. And today we're actually going to talk about Kubo and the next wave of customer deployments, but really what we're talking about is the new container runtime that was announced yesterday. And so I have a number of questions that I'd like to ask the panelists, but I'd like to first at least to introduce everyone. We have Abby Kearns of the Cloud Foundry, Executive Director of the Cloud Foundry Foundation, Sarah Novotny of Google. We have Marco Hostrasser of Swisscom, Ian Andrews of Pivotal, Mark Peek of VMware, and Frederick Lardenois of TechCrunch, my old colleague from back in the day at Rewrite Web. This is Frederick's first pancake breakfast with us, so welcome, and welcome everyone else who's here for the first time. We'd just like to have fun with this, and so if you do have a question, please raise your hand. I think what I would like to start off at least is like helping people understand kind of what was announced yesterday, and perhaps we could start with that. Like, so Kubo came onto the scene really around the Cloud Foundry Summit in Santa Clara.
That's when it was officially donated to Cloud Foundry Foundation.
Right. It had been announced prior to that, right? It had been actually discussed and been in the open.
But Google and Pivotal started the work on it in about November of 2016. And then in June at the summit, it was officially donated to the Cloud Foundry Foundation so that we could continue the work in the open with and pull in more companies and more organizations.
We unveiled it at Sarah's conference on stage with Sam, actually.
Oh, really?
Back in February.
Back in February, that's when it first came. That's when it first appeared. Okay.
Wraps off.
Okay. So tell us. So Ian, maybe you could tell us a little bit, kind of the thinking behind it at the time. What was, because perhaps you could also, either Abby or Ian, you could talk a little bit about what actually, this container runtime is, and what the idea was at the time when you were thinking about, when you were talking about it, just in those initial discussions.
Go, Ian.
Well, the genesis for us was actually customers were coming to us and they said, hey, we love a bunch of qualities about Cloud Foundry: operational efficiency, developer productivity, security, availability. Those are all awesome. We've got a bunch of workloads, though, that don't run well on Cloud Foundry today, the application runtime. And so we're also running Kubernetes, and we're having a hard time managing it. Is there an opportunity to bring these things together? And our engineering team actually had great working relationship with Eric Johnson and a bunch of the other Google engineers. We've been working on bringing Cloud Foundry to Google Cloud Platform, building things like the Meta Service Broker. So we started talking about this problem with Eric, kind of as our customers had represented it to us, and said, what do you think about this? Does it make sense to run Kubernetes on top of BOSH? And Eric's view is like, yeah, because inside of Google, there's this thing called Borg, which if you're familiar with the history of BOSH, Mark Lukowski and some of the other folks, Vadim, who originally created BOSH, came from Google. So there's actually some interesting circular history there. And they said there's not really an open source equivalent directly in the Kubernetes ecosystem. So this would actually be bringing this two-layer scheduler concept back together. It could be incredibly powerful. So in true Google fashion, they said, we'd love to work on that. Let's see what we can do.
So that part ended up being that much more exciting to the team that was working on Kubernetes, because the team working on Kubernetes is very much about the open source rebuild and re-execution, re-evolution of Borg. And Google is, of course, a very big company, lots of little pockets of people doing things. And the group that had been working with Pivotal on Cloud Foundry and getting that to work on Google Cloud Platform sort of independently started working on this, but didn't exactly engage initially with the Kubernetes open source community. And so it was a bit of a surprise, but that's exactly what open source is about. So we were really excited because somebody was like, hey, we see a gap, and we can get started and work on it. And then it has now been integrated, and we're working more closely at this point so that there's a clear use case from users that now open source has gone and filled and brought two great platforms together, right back to our peanut butter and chocolate, Swiss chocolate, mind you. But that was, so it's a great story, and it's a great feel-good story for open source, but also for end users getting what they need.
So Mark, what's your take on Kubernetes and this new, really, flavor of both Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes, and this idea of using BOSH underneath to run Kubernetes?
Well, I think Sarah has seen in the Kubernetes community, there's a lot of effort around running Kubernetes on Kubernetes in order to do the lifecycle management of it. But in a lot of ways, BOSH is proven technology. It's been supporting Cloud Foundry for quite some time, and it is a perfect way to do lifecycle management of Kubernetes, just like it does Cloud Foundry. So I'm very happy about seeing BOSH in there in the mix, and everyone knows how to operate it, be able to deploy it, and provide that as a way to upgrade and manage Kubernetes.
Frederick, how are you?
Doing all right. I'm very sad Stacky isn't here.
Yeah, I know. I know why you're here.
You promised me pancakes.
Yes,
no
I did.
robot,
I
but
did.
That's a different question. We'll talk about that later.
So I'm curious from your perspective. So you follow this community like I do, right? And you see the evolution of Kubernetes, and now suddenly Cloud Foundry is playing a part in it. I mean, what's your kind of outside perspective on what you're seeing here? Because folks in here are very much invested in it. We're kind of sitting on the side just asking questions and providing our own perspective on it. So I'm curious.
Well, to me, it's just another example that there's no stopping the Kubernetes train. It just seems to be moving faster and faster. On the Cloud Foundry side, I was at first rather confused about why Cloud Foundry would do this, because it seems to be mixing not just different communities, but different ideas of managing software. And maybe we can get into why you're doing that later. But I wonder how the market will react to that, because it does muddle maybe the message of Cloud Foundry a little bit. Mm-hmm. So that'd be my perspective as on the outside.
This may be a perfect segue to ask the audience for a question. And just remember that if you ask a question, you get 5 tickets and to win the BOSH headphones. But that aside, what are the questions that you have about Cloud Foundry Kubernetes? How many people actually here are using Kubernetes? Small handful of people. So what questions do you have about, how many run Cloud Foundry? I mean, almost everyone, I expect, right? Right. So who would consider running the Cloud Foundry Container Runtime? Who would consider, can we find out, talk to you guys, ask a question in the back? And maybe ask a question of what you're interested in about it. Can you tell us that?
Well, I think most of our development teams can run fine on Cloud Foundry, but we do have workloads that don't fit there. And for them, we now have something called OpenShift, which we really not too fond of. So maybe that could be a good replacement.
Any Red Hatters in the audience? Probably not.
So, that's not really, so this is not really a question, but I do like those 5 tickets now.
So what is it? Have you tried running Cloud Foundry with Kubernetes in the past?
Not together, no.
Okay. Anyone else? The gentleman next to you here.
Yeah, I basically got the same answer though. It's about that different workloads and having the ability to utilize more of the multi-cloud strategy for more applications than you could traditionally fit onto a Cloud Foundry Elastic Runtime type container orchestrator.
So what do you want to know? What would be your question? What are the questions going through your mind about how this actually might work for you?
I think from a developer's perspective, the Cloud Foundry has always had a very strong story around developer productivity. And I think my question is how we're going to help the community to adjust to dealing with two different paradigms, essentially, put at the same time.
So that's a question for that's actually a community question. It's a technology question. Any thoughts?
Well, I'd say, first and foremost, yes, they are two different communities. I don't necessarily know that they're two different paradigms, because when you step back and think about cloud-native architectures, cloud-native best practices, the goal is to automate and abstract as much as possible. So I think they have very similar paradigms. I think the idea is the opportunity to handle different workloads in different ways, and that addresses both near-term, your ability to have portability and build towards cloud-native solutions, but long-term, Cloud Foundry isn't, Elastic Runtime or now Application Runtime isn't going to be the right solution for every single application. And we want to make sure that both Cloud Foundry as a whole continues to evolve, but also take advantage of best-of-breed technology solutions.
I want to ask Marco. I want to ask Marco a quick question because he hasn't had a chance to chat. And I know you guys have invested heavily in Cloud Foundry, and and now we're starting to see kind of the emergence of Kubo. And I'm sure you've had lots of discussions about it. How does that affect kind of your story and how you're thinking about what are those different workloads you might present that would make that runtime, something that customers would find of value?
Sure. No, I mean, on one side, we are running Cloud Foundry with thousands of containers online, right? And in production since 2 years. And there is a lot of knowledge on how to run the stack, how to run it with BOSH. So kind of Kubernetes, or Kubo, better say, the container runtime enables us to just take this know-how and put it into fact with Kubernetes. Actually, internally, we're running Kubernetes already since a while for providing our services. So we had this issue as well on our own breed, and we solved that pretty similarly to Kubo, which we now also help Pivotal to solve. But back to your question, I think it's very important to also tell the community that there is, between Kubernetes and Cloud Foundry, there is a different level of paths where you go through, right? You're more standardized in Cloud Foundry. So it's a way more standardized stack, but it also gives you more value when you need to have enterprise applications compared to when you have, let's call it, more the normal container orchestration. I think with this segregation, we make that clear for the community, but also tell them, hey, we know the problem, and here's how we think you can solve that nicely and have both worlds.
Mark, I'd like to hear your thoughts, and then Ian, I know you have some perspectives here.
Yeah, the way I think about it is really developer choice, which is some developers want to go with paths, some want to go directly to Kubernetes. So the developers get their choice, but also you then get the same operational excellence and be able to lifecycle manage that. So it's really the best of both worlds for the developers and for the IT ops side of things.
But I don't know about that. I'm not so sure. Because we had a pancake breakfast in Toronto where Stacky was. And people were talking about the tyranny of choice. And we've talked about this, right? The tyranny of choice out there, and it's overwhelming. So, how many people would agree with that statement, the tyranny of choice, when you're looking out at the technology landscape? There are a few, yeah. Well, maybe not.
It's
but-
still early, Alex.
Yes, it is still early. So how do you address that tyranny of choice?
Well, I think the biggest difference from a developer standpoint here is going to be platform constructed containers versus developer constructed containers. I mean, that's really what we're talking about, is the big difference from a UX perspective. Most people running code on Cloud Foundry just give the platform code, a jar file, if they've written a Java application. And the platform's responsible for actually building the container, updating all the dependencies, maintaining your app server, your JVM. If you're running on Kubernetes, that's on you, or somebody else in the organization, or another system that's responsible for building and maintaining those dependencies. So there's a level of complexity that you could be implying on the developers. In some cases, that's entirely appropriate. But I think where this starts to get really exciting is you look at other software developers in the ecosystem who historically would have mailed you a DVD, or maybe more recently shipped you a tarball and a run book. Here's how you install it and configure it. And now they're saying, hey, here's a container image, a Docker file. It's already pre-constructed, right? Largely configured, but I expect you to have a container scheduler. So you don't own the source code. You don't have the ability to change it. You can't necessarily be picky about the networking or persistence constraints. You kind of have to take it as it is. And that was a workload that was always a thing that, you could run Docker images on Cloud Foundry, but there was a set of bounds and constraints that would keep some of those workloads off the platform. Is anybody doing Spark? Big data workload? SAP guys are, I know. We talked about this back in May at the summit. So if you follow the Spark community at all, right, in the big data space, there's been an effort ongoing for the last year or so to make Kubernetes a native scheduler for Spark. So today, people either run Spark standalone, or they run it on top of Mesos or Yarn, right? Those are the scheduler options. But this effort, which is almost complete, I think Google's got a big hand in driving this, is Spark native on top of Kubernetes. And so you look at that workload, I don't think anybody's tried to run Spark on Cloud Foundry. If you have, I'd love to hear about it. But that was just something that was outside the domain of what we were really trying to do. So the opportunity here is to bring that all together, but do it in a way that we're still delivering an embedded operating system, guarantees around availability, zero downtime updates of the platform. That's incredibly powerful.
So in essence, offer that opinionated platform.
It's on top of BOSH, which I think I would argue is the platform in a lot of cases.
Is this clearing anything up for you, Frederick?
A little bit. I still, just being the agitator for a moment here, but Cloud Foundry is already a complex project as it is with its almost 500 repositories. You're adding an additional layer on top of that now with the container runtime. There is a risk for we've seen it with OpenStack at some point. There were so many projects and so many things going on at the same time that it almost collapsed under its own weight. Is there I'm just taking your role here for a moment.
No, it's fine. That's why I have you here.
Is there a risk here for Cloud Foundry to run into an issue like that?
I'm trying to think how I would answer that, but
the answer is no.
Well, I mean, I was going to say no, but I wanted
it's open source.
I wanted to be thoughtful about it. I wanted to say no, hell no. Of course, we'll never recreate that. I think when Cloud Foundry Foundation was created and it was moved into an open source project, we had the luxury of learning a lot from OpenStack. They, as a foundation, have been very open and sharing ideas and failures and best practices. So we actually thought very deeply about OpenStack and what worked. Obviously, Josh McKinty's been very vocal about what worked and what doesn't work. And, those are all things we took into consideration. Cloud Foundry also has a very different process for being a contributor and a committer, and there is a much more stringent cohesion around the vision and backlogs and how backlogs are managed. So Yes, it's complex. It's a platform. Platforms are going to be inherently complex. The amount of capabilities that are baked into Cloud Foundry prior to bringing in container runtime are pretty significant. You know, identity management, container orchestration, logging, metrics. You start adding all those things in, and it does add complexity. But that's the value of that platform, because either you're building it yourself, or you're getting it, consuming it in a singular platform. And then bringing container runtime in, I think, just adds to the breadth of the capabilities, but also allowing, going back to what Ian said, it allows what is a singular outcome, is giving that developer the ability to run their applications easily and have that day two success in terms of operations.
So I'd like to bring it back to Sarah, because Sarah, man, you lead open source projects, and there's just so many of them, and you're talking yourself about how far and wide they can end up being, and you don't even know about things because they're just being built, and people are using the open source community to develop what they're interested in. So, from your perspective, how are you thinking about managing something like this from a community perspective? And to avoid these issues where Kubernetes could be so drawn out and become balkanized to some extent.
Yeah. So we've spent a lot of time in the last 12 months working on governance around Kubernetes and value and visions and what is defined as core to Kubernetes. And actually Cloud Foundry is really interesting for that reason, that there is a key opinionated core to it that then handles a lot of the enterprise services, the services that the enterprise expect, in a way that Kubernetes hasn't done yet. And may or may not, which is another interesting perspective on it. We are trying to draw Kubernetes to be a very narrow core with very clean edges so that it can integrate better and more easily with third-party ecosystems.
So narrow core.
Yes.
With sharp edges.
With sharp, no, not sharp edges.
Sounds like a knife.
Clear edges.
Clear edges.
Well-documented edges.
Well-documented edges.
Lots of integration points.
Lots of integration points.
So that people can actually build to the edges of and extend Kubernetes in a meaningful way, while core remains very solid and very well managed. We took a lot of, as every project right now has taken a lot of experiences and learnings from the OpenStack experience. OpenStack was a fantastic and amazing and crazy new way of building open source. Like in 2010, there weren't many other projects that had said, I'm going to take 10 or 15 large companies who are dedicating full-time staff to build a thing together. So it was this mad experiment which had lots of things that we've learned from it. One of the bigger pain points we saw and are trying to change in Kubernetes is the fact that lots of the very specific, very vendor-specific, very edge cases are incredibly well built out, whereas the core pieces in the center, trying to hold everything together, didn't get as much time. So in the Kubernetes world, we talk a lot about companies who want to contribute to Kubernetes need to come in and chop wood and carry water. So they have to contribute to core. They have to be involved. Yes. They have to come in, they have to contribute, they have to be involved in a meaningful way in core to make that strong, and to give us those nice clean edges where they can then extend through modular things, through additional side projects, through connections with Cloud Foundry, that kind of work.
Great.
And I actually think, sorry, just to add to that, I mean, two specific examples where we've been doing this. So one, Open Service Broker API.
Yes. Oh, fantastic example,
right?
Yes.
So I wouldn't take away from this that Kubo and Container Runtime was this overnight snap decision. It was like, no, actually there's a utility in connecting these two together via the ecosystem of things that run on the platforms. And so that's actually now advanced. I think, did 1.8 Open Service Broker API went GA in Kubernetes?
Yes.
Okay, I thought so. It's hard to track two roadmaps in my head, so I was just confirming.
It's hard to track
But
one
the other
roadmap.
piece is actually Istio. So I don't know if anyone's looking at Istio. This started at the core. There's a project called Envoy in there that came out of Lyft. Some code from IBM. Fabricate, right, was the piece that came in there for policy management. So this service mesh concept, so that's something that the networking team within Cloud Foundry is now looking at. How do we bring that into the application runtime? So there's actually been quite a lot of pieces sort of going across these two ecosystems for some time. The other point I just want to make clear is Kubo is not a distribution of Kubernetes where there's an attempt to fork or value add on top of it in a way that, because honestly, Kubernetes is going so fast right now, it's just like Cloud Foundry.
Why do you even say that?
Because I wanted to make clear that it's not a distribution. The point is actually to maintain constant compatibility with latest stable release, which is the GKE model. So this is materially different than, hey, we're going to, like the Hadoop distribution wars where all of a sudden you had 10 vendors.
So this is a GKE model.
This is Kubernetes delivered, looking at GKE as the true North Star of Kubernetes, the best implementation and example, attempting to maintain constant compatibility.
So where does that leave GKE? I'm just curious.
So GKE exists as a public cloud platform execution of Kubernetes, whereas Kubo and the container runtime on Cloud Foundry just has Cloud Foundry, or not just, has Cloud Foundry as the cloud underlaying it. So we talk about how to have multiple cloud providers, multiple platforms underneath Kubernetes. So OpenStack exists as something that you can easily run Kubernetes on top of. Cloud Foundry, Azure, AWS, Google Cloud Platform by itself, or GKE as the containers as a service.
GKE being the Google Container Engine, which is for some reason has a K in there, which I think stands for Kubernetes, but isn't called the Google Kubernetes Engine. So there's some marketing issues there.
We have a question? Do you have
That
a question?
conversation keeps happening.
Devin?
Yeah, hi. Coming back to Ian's point that the point of container runtime is not adding anything on top of Kubernetes, then I'm really wondering, like, what is the Cloud Foundry part in the container engine? Like, to me, Cloud Foundry is CF push. Right? It's ONSY's haiku is, here is my code, run it in the cloud for me, I don't care how. If container engine is not adding anything on top of Kubernetes, then maybe it's a trick question, but how Cloud Foundry is OpenShift? Right? So it's offering Kubernetes. Is that now the same? Is that also Cloud Foundry OpenShift? So like, what is it that makes Cloud Foundry Cloud Foundry?
BOSH.
That's the thing? If you install anything with BOSH, it's Cloud Foundry?
No. That's
good question.
No, that's a good question. But no, BOSH is really, when you think about Kubo, it is basically, as Ian pointed out, it's Kubernetes just on BOSH. It's running, and the reason we had rebranded it to Container Runtime and we rebranded Elastic Runtime to Application Runtime is when you think about Cloud Foundry, we want you to think about all of those things. So what is Cloud Foundry? Well, Cloud Foundry is now Application Runtime, which is where you can CF push your app. And it's Container Runtime, where you can deploy your app in a containerized workload alongside the application runtime. So you can run both of these things. And they're both supported by BOSH. And I want to make that clear because right now BOSH is not a requirement to run Cloud Foundry. There are several distributions that are not leveraging BOSH today. But I did want to point out that when the goal is when you think about Cloud Foundry, you have those options. Because CF push doesn't work for every application. If you're running something like TensorFlow, that's not something you're going to want to CF push to Cloud Foundry. So we want to make sure that you have opportunity for all of your workloads to be ran in a single platform, and could both all be supported by BOSH.
Follow-up question, does that make sense to you?
Come on, Marco.
It's still hard for me to, if we are talking about keeping the core and the vision nice and clean, it's still very hard for me to understand what is the vision, like what is the goal. And the goal to me is make the CF push experience maybe I'm just understanding it incorrectly, but to me it always was, making that CF push experience as nice and easy as possible. I, as a developer, I don't care if it's run in containers, if it's a function as a service, if it's whatever. I don't care. If you want at some point decide to run all of my applications on bare metal, I don't care. I want to write my code. I don't want to care. I want to bind services. That's it.
But that's maybe I can take it. I mean that's the goal of Cloud Foundry, right? We want to make sure that you all invested into Cloud Foundry and want to make sure the next 10 years you can keep doing what you do with your 12-factor apps, right? That's clearly the statement. Now it's also clear that a platform like that, with the complexity like that, 500 repos, needs to have an evolution. So we need to continue. So now we learned there are other workloads we need to tackle, and now this application container runtime is a first step to move in that direction. And I mean, you are the community of Cloud Foundry, right? So you will push the direction of this first step. We said hey, let's have this dual engine, and let's see if this works, and then have the next evolution path, right? But for us, it's very, very important that this is a long term for all of you who are users in that. Because if we would just change from today to tomorrow or to whatever, this will not work for you, and will not work for all the environments which are built up. That's also why Kubo makes sense. The biggest environments in Cloud Foundry are running on BOSH today. So that is, we give you the easiest access to it, and now let's look at the next steps.
So I'll also tie.
And we have a question just over here, quickly.
Can I tie in with what
ahead.
Marco and Ian have said, though? So to Marco's point, we can't and don't change things rapidly because there are new needs evolving. We need to also support collectively in all of our different projects end users as they are today. To Ian's point, it took a year and a half, I think, before Service Broker sort of broke out and ended up being a thing between the two groups. And I have been hearing conversations to exactly this point. How do you bring CF push experience to Kubernetes? Is that the right thing to do? Is there a way to do it? And will it be something that, longer term is supportable, useful, asked for by the industry? So you just got, another little tick mark in places and people who have asked for something like this. So these conversations are happening, and whether or not they're architecturally right is still a big open question.
Question.
Yes, I have a follow-up question on Marco's. I had exactly the same question, but I would word it a bit differently. Now that Cloud Foundry has two runtime, Application Runtime and Container Runtime, so it means that the Cloud Foundry Foundation is embracing two types of workloads. And so it's great to see integration coming between the two. So first step is enabling connectivity from Application Runtime to Container Runtime, so that application can connect to workload running on Kubernetes. So that goes with discovery and service mesh. So that's a great first step. I'm wondering how much effort would be put on the container runtime, and how much consistency will the Cloud Foundry community will bring between the two experiences. Will we see convergence in terms of user experience, so that Cloud Foundry users that are expected to use application runtime and container runtime can use the same org and space concepts between those two? Can I have the same authentication? Can they consume logs from application runtime in the same way they would consume logs from container runtime? Will they consume metrics from application in the same way? So, yes.
That's a great question, actually. So I think this is where Sarah's point earlier about Kubernetes maintaining a slim core with well-defined boundaries and APIs for integration, logging and metrics. There's not a de facto out of the box. There's a bunch of different options of how you collect logs and metrics from your pods in a Kubernetes environment. Same thing with user identity and authentication, authorization, so the UAA component. There's kind of a logical thing to say, hey, could I have shared identity across these two environments? And the third one that's super interesting is tenancy. So you brought up orgs and spaces. Cloud Foundry has always had fairly robust logical segmentation because it was built from the outset to be a multi-tenanted platform. Kubernetes, that's evolved over time, right? So in the current versions, you have this construct of sort of namespacing and labeling for isolation, but it's not as inbuilt to the platform as the orgs and spaces concept. So one of the things that we're thinking about is if you look at the GKE model of how do you provision Kubernetes, there's not one that's shared. They make it very easy to provision lots of Kubernetes. Right? So a small team or a specific application gets their own cluster. Now, in lots of environments, that could be super complex from an operational perspective. So there's an opportunity to say, hey, if you need strong isolation at the cluster level, let's just provision lots of these with the on-demand broker potentially.
Great. I know there's other questions. I want to make sure we get to them. So just let me get to the question. I know, but we got to get to the.
I want to add one thing to that.
Let Abby. We'll have Abby add one more thing, but we do want to get some more questions in. So
super fast.
Yeah.
Guillaume, there's a lot of addition. This is pretty new. You know, it was just contributed to the foundation in June. There are a lot of conversations going on around how to both collaborate more and build on top of this as a starting point. To make an open source plug, there's also an opportunity for each and every one of you to be part of that and contribute to the work either through the Open Service Broker API, Istio, Envoy, or some of the other projects that we'll be spinning up to support the different layers of integration and capability. And so this is where I would make the call to action for each and every one of you to both be part of that conversation, but also be part of the efforts around that.
Okay, great. Question?
Okay, it's already covered, the questions.
Question? We have a question over here then? Oh, hold on, wait for the mic. There's a mic right here.
I have actually two questions. So it's like, because now it's possible to deploy Kubernetes with BOSH. So are you not afraid that it will simply replace Cloud Foundry? Because actually, as it was stated yesterday on one of the talk, that Kubernetes is so to speak, kicking the ass of Cloud Foundry. And my second question is then maybe in this case, are you not thinking like maybe replacing Diego with Kubernetes as the container manager? I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
Mark, do you have any thoughts on this you'd like to share or no?
No. How many people are running Diego today? Okay, people with your hands up, how many containers do you have running on Diego? Hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands? Yeah, okay. So would you like to see us spend the next year focused on ripping that out and replacing it with something that doesn't improve the experience or the capabilities of the platform at all? Does that seem like a good idea?
That's a tough question to ask. And maybe provide another
biased slightly. I'm just saying.
It's totally biased.
I think you've got, the way we're looking at this is how can we bring more workloads onto a common platform, embedded operating system, high efficiency of operations, high availability, zero downtime updates, not kind of regressing work that's already been done.
Go for it. Wait.
I would add from the open source standpoint, there are no immediate plans to replace Diego with Kubernetes. But what I think we would like to continue to encourage is the evolution of the technologies, both independently as well as where are those connection points and where does that evolve to. The one thing that is powerful about an open source technology like Cloud Foundry is its ability to evolve and continuously evolve to support both the developer needs as well as the growing needs of application workloads.
Okay.
Can I address the first question that you had, which was, I'm going to go back to something I said previously, which is developer choice. If people really want Kubernetes, we're giving them a great way to run Kubernetes. If they want to run Application Runtime, they can run Application Runtime. And guess what? You can put those together and they work well together. So again, having choice in what our developers are asking for, which is a broader community asks that's
But
happening.
that opens the question, why not any technology infrastructure to go with it? Why not, Mesos for that matter? I mean, there's all kinds of different ways you could think about this. You could say, yeah, it's a choice, but there's all kinds of choices that you could offer, right?
This is one of those natural coalescences, though, that happen in open source. There's lots of different things that get started, and then the technologies that are more useful to end users sort of rise up and then end up working together or merging or evolving into something even more impressive. So the combination of Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes is giving more opportunities and more options to Cloud Foundry users. And some will find that Diego actually is a more successful scheduler for them. Some will find that the pluggable scheduler system in Kubernetes is more useful for them, and that's okay.
Okay.
And
we need to ask, I want to make sure we get the audience. And you had a question, there's follow-up.
Yeah, I was about to expand this question in terms of component to reuse between Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes. So yes, the scheduler is one important part. And I'm wondering, Istio, Service Mesh is another great example that's being shared. And I'm wondering how much can we expect of this component sharing to increase velocity for both communities. One other example is build packs. So we have build packs with OCI, and so we could be sharing images. So for example, Google has the Cloud Builder's open source image builder, which looks very similar to the Cloud Foundry build pack. So how much can we expect of sharing across this community will benefit to increase velocity?
This is what I'm going to do here, okay? You each get 1 minute, okay, to provide your perspective. So Marcos, let's start with you first. You have a perspective here.
So are we just in general?
No, we're just his question, but also you can provide your perspective too. Okay, well, that's all right. Sarah?
I can go. So I think we've got some really great examples of OCI, Open Service Broker, the Kubernetes Service Catalog, which works across multiple projects, Istio, Envoy. These are all projects which are working toward composable infrastructure for cloud native. And Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes are just two key anchor points, nexus.
Great. Marco?
I think it goes back to the long-term strategy we have, right? So there will be reuse, and it should be reuse. We have a certified core, which is very strong. Certification is very strong, which we have. It allows you to bet 10 years on it, not just 5. And I think there will be evolution, and we have to look at this evolution.
Great. Abby?
We mentioned before that there is a lot of activity going on, a lot of collaboration from across both Cloud Foundry Foundation as well as the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. There's a lot of opportunity to continue to invest strongly in the best possible solutions for open source cloud native solutions. And I think with that vision, I think we all have collectively the same vision across both of these communities, is that how do we enable more users to be part of the cloud native evolution with their workloads?
Ian.
I think so, yes. I mean, someone actually told me that Jared Ray, if anyone remembers Iron Foundry, Jared's actually got build packs working on Kubernetes, supposedly in a private Git repo.
Cool.
Someplace. So if anyone's friends with Jared,
I'm friends with Jared. I'm going to get in touch with him right now.
All of our technologies over the course of the time that I've been in this industry are built on top of each other. We contribute to the projects, we see the improvements, someone says, oh, I can do that a little bit better, we build, we keep building, and I see this as a natural way to be able to combine forces, be able to use common componentry, and be able to continue to build up. 5 years from now, we'll probably be talking about totally different technologies. 10 years from now, different technologies. And that's a good thing.
Frederick, the last word.
Oh, God. Obviously, there's a lot of opportunity for Cloud Foundry and CNCF and OCI and everybody to work together. The skeptic in me says that's more politics. That might make things harder. But at the end of the day, it's about making the developer experience easier, right? So that's what it comes down to.
Great. Well, why don't we have a drawing now, and so we're going to give away the big prize here. Abby, do you want to pick?
You guys put your tickets in here?
Put your tickets in. Oh, okay. Well, we can keep talking, actually. We can keep talking if anyone has anything else to say.
Well, I'll say one more, which is to Frederick's point about more politics. The groups that you mentioned, OCI, CNCF, and Cloud Foundry, are almost a complete Venn intersection of the platinum level board members, at least. So the guidance that's happening and these conversations continue to happen. And how can we make this more successful and more impressive and more useful to the end users?
Having to attend meetings for all
Quick
of
questions. Yeah.
My 8 to 10 a.m. time slot is like totally booked.
All right, while we're collecting
I have quick, little bit lower level question. So, are there any plans of integrating some components of like Cloud Foundry to Kubernetes, like QA, not only UA, but Cred Hub, maybe Silk, maybe some other low-level stuff?
I think it's all possible. We start thinking about the opportunities to collaborate. Open Service Broker API really opened the door to figuring out more ways to run more components across these different workloads. And I think with Istio, Envoy, and a lot of other conversations that are going on, I think there's an entire possibility around that.
Okay. We have any other? Are we almost done?
Everybody got their tickets in?
Look, there's still some in the back. Jeez, okay. All right. Anyone have a question quickly they want to ask? This is the opportunity right here.
I have a question to you, Alex.
Yeah.
How will you call the pancake and podcast without a pancake? I mean, we just renamed from Kubo to Container Runtime,
We have pancakes.
right?
We have pancakes
So
out here.
We did this. Cloud Foundry did this transition from Kubo to Container Runtime. I mean, how will this be called in the future?
Well, this is still going to be the pancake and podcast because we serve pancakes out here.
That's not the same. It's not the same.
No.
I think we need marketing here.
Stacky followed the pancake breakfast was first, and then
He's
Stacky
waffling.
came on as a plug-in. Okay, Stacky was a plug-in. All right, we plugged Stacky into the breakfast, and who knows what we're going to do next? Because actually, you know who actually has the pancake robot right now? Ken Owens. We sent the pancake robot to Ken Owens, and so I expect there may be a video or two from Stacky in retirement. So, the story continues.
Ken's a MasterCard now, right?
Yeah, he's a MasterCard.
All right.
Okay.
Winner is 461674.
Yeah, whoa!
Who
was didn't even ask a question.
Sven?
Yeah. All right. So what are you gonna? What music are you gonna listen to on this?
Probably.
What genre?
Probably none, because I already got them.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for being here, and thank you VMware for sponsoring this Pancake Breakfast. Thank you to the Cloud Foundry Foundation for making this possible. This has been a lot of fun. Thanks everyone. Have a great conference. Thanks to VMware for sponsoring the Pancake Breakfast from the Cloud Foundry Summit in Basel, Switzerland. Learn more about VMware's cloud-native applications at cloud.vmware.com. Listen to more episodes of the NewStack Analysts at thenewstack.io/podcasts. Please rate and review us on iTunes, like us on YouTube, and follow us on SoundCloud. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.